The Walking Dead is finally over, at least for now, because we still have 3 more new spin-offs coming out, as well as the Fear the Walking Dead, which I don't care about. But in today's video, I'm going to be ranking every single Walking Dead season from worst to best. Now, again, just so you know, I'm a big fan of The Walking Dead. This is the first major TV show that I ever truly got into. The comic book series was the first big comic book series that I ever actually finished from beginning to end. And now we're talking about the ending once again. I do have a full review up and a reaction after that episode had ended to discuss my full thoughts on there. But this video is going to precisely talk about the entire series as a whole. So strap in, hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy movies and TV content on a daily basis. And as well as leave your thoughts and ranking down below. But without further ado, let's dive in right now. So coming down at my number 11 is The Walking Dead Season 7. Easily one of the biggest downfalls of this entire show. This is the start of it all. This is where people really stopped following the show, and for, good reason. For me, I never fell off because of the Glenn and Abraham death at the very beginning of the season. I still think that episode is like one of the top 5 best episodes of television ever. That experience that night was like a religious thing, communicating and watching it with friends, because we had a huge party, like wondering who was going to die. There was predictions obviously leading in, but as it kind of came out, this was the major pivotal point in the comics, and it was the same thing many of us fans were waiting for. And that episode delivered. Even though I hated the ending of Season 6, that episode delivered. But sadly, the rest of the season after that, it just felt like us as fans were waiting for something to happen. And when you have 16 episodes, I think it's 16 episodes and an entire season, and nothing really happens, it becomes pretty bad. Because All-Out War, and you're going to hear me talk about this within Season 8, should have just been 1 season. Or 1.5 seasons, if anything. Not a full 2 seasons. And if you include some of the prologue stuff before we meet Negan in Season 6, I mean, there's things all in there too. So this is a show that had a concept, and it's arguably their biggest thing in the comics, and you didn't execute it correctly. Again, for me, this season, like, killing off Abraham and Glenn were great, but it's what you do after that to really satisfy the fans, and that's what didn't really work here. It really much was the Saviors just pummeling and beating the shit out of our main characters, and I didn't like that. Daryl's captivated for most of it. Sasha gives her life for honestly really no point. Everything just truly felt out too dragged out, and this was the season that really started to lose me. Coming into my number 10 is Season 8, the ending of All-Out War. Now, the reason this gets a little bit of a bonus is because we get a little bit more detail with all the different communities, and once All-Out War finally kicks off, that is when this season really started to work. Now, by the end, it really much the conflict, it felt just resolved in a little bit, and for my opinion, a little bit anticlimactic. We knew it was coming. We knew Rick was going to win. And for me, in that particular moment, some of it came together, but it just felt all too dragged out at that point. Also, the death of Carl in here was probably one of the dumbest decisions they've ever done on the show. Now, I understand there was probably some personal things going on behind the scenes. We heard that a lot with certain characters that had died in here, or just certain things with the writing, but this was one of the bigger ones, and I feel like for me, Carl was one of the pivotal points of this entire show, and I really think this was a detriment to actually kill him off. Typically because they finally started building him up in the last few seasons to really emphasize what was being built up from the comic. Killing off Shiva, while we knew it was going to happen, broke our hearts as well, and that just didn't set right with me either. Again, All-Out War was fun for the most part. It was nice, and when you actually go back and binge Season 7 and 8, it doesn't feel as bad. But when you watch this week to week, it is easily some of the weakest TV I've ever watched, and this really, again, was the start of the downfall, and The Walking Dead really needed to come back with Season 9, and thankfully for me, at least, I think they did. The last thing I do want to say about Season 8, though, was I was happy to see Eugene finally get something to do. Seeing him sabotage the ammo is probably one of the most satisfying moments in the entire show, and I was really happy to finally get that, and it finally made me a fan of Eugene as a character. Now we get to my number 9. Now, pretty much 9 and up, I can say that I thoroughly enjoy each and every one of the seasons, even if there are some slow and dull moments to it, because when it comes down to The Walking Dead, one of the things that I've always said about the comic books and the show is that this is more of a drama with horror themes to it and some action sprinkled here and there. This is a show that's dealing with humans in a world that is falling apart, with zombies not really being the main crux and the villain of it all, but really much just being something out there for them to avoid. And sometimes they're a big part of it, sometimes they're not, but it really comes down to the sake of humanity. And I think Season 2 is going to be coming into my number 9. And the reason it's in my number 9 is because I do find that this is the season that spent way too much damn time on that fucking farm. I still cannot emphasize that they spent an entire season on the farm. You come off season 1, which is, season 1's great. Then you spend all this time on the farm. This is one of the most least rewatchable seasons for me because of a lot of its emphasis. They're spending all their time trying to find Sophia. Then they find Sophia. Then they're still stuck on this fucking farm. But let me say this and let me talk about the good things, because I did like this season overall. Besides of how slow-paced the season was, this is a season that, again, started emphasizing and giving us more development to each and every one of the characters, specifically Carol, who, when we look back at this season to where we see her at the end of this show, I think it is one of the best and truest character arcs of the entire everything. As well as also adding into here some of the decisions and some of the choices that they make, specifically with Carl getting shot and Herschel having to save his life. There's a lot of great elements in there, but this is the first season that really starts to dive into, and again, being in the second season, the first season dealt with the zombies and everything of what's going on in this world. Season 2 finally starts shining a light on the humanity aspect and how humans react to other humans in this world. And we actually see Rick take on other humans in that bar when he goes out to save Herschel. Love that sequence. Love when Rick and Shane are actually going head-to-head as they're two alpha males in this leading group, and we know one of them has to die. And for me, those elements all set up and evolve into such a beautiful but heart-shattering finale that also leaves us the recommendation of us knowing that you don't just have to be bit. You can die and come right back, and that they are all the Walking Dead at that point. And when you see Shane come back in that way, and then Carl has to shoot him in the head, all that buildup just worked wonders. And I think all that buildup between Rick versus Shane is one of the best things, and I actually think is better than the way that they handled it in the comics. I think as a season that's bridging the gap from season 1 to 3, this was a nice build-up season that developed all the characters in a certain way. Even though this season definitely started to slow down the pacing, this is one that when you revisit, even though it's not the most enjoyable rewatch, is super pivotal to every single character involved in this season. The heartbreak, the destruction, and really much the dissection of what it takes for the future of the Walking Dead show. On my number 8, we have season 10. Now, season 10 is one of those seasons that was sadly affected by COVID. So there's quite a few things in here, specifically everything on the back end that wasn't totally working for me. Specifically those COVID episodes they filmed, I actually thought really added nothing besides the Negan backstory, which is one of the biggest highlights of this entire season. And I did like season 10. I actually think after coming off season 9, which you're going to hear me talk about in a second, which really finally hit the stride, and the momentum really kept going into season 10, and actually seeing how this war was going to be going on with the Whispers was quite interesting. While there was a lot of buildup, of course, adding in finally finishing off the Whispers herself, because Negan finally gets that redemption arc of joining them and then taking them on in the inside and seeing how that works, and kind of when they captured Daryl and that whole great moment, that was so satisfying, as well as just seeing the whole finale and seeing them finally fight them all off was fantastic, and seeing them kill off Alpha was a big thing, and then seeing Beta have to come into its own, as well as Lydia joining the group and kind of all those elements kind of still continuing, and seeing how, like, when you look at Lydia, she can relate so much to Negan as well. And as well as seeing how much Carol is really much the loss of all these kids in her lives, where that trauma starts to go, and some critical errors that she starts to make throughout the season, which puts other people in jeopardy. I didn't fully love, but I still liked. And Michonne's send-off was also pretty beautiful in the season as well, even though I didn't like the psychedelic drug stuff. I thought Virgil was honestly a waste of a character. For me, it's the redemption arc of Negan, the finalization of really much the Whispers, and the continuation of really much furthering out Negan as a character, and all these other characters. This was a show that started to show me that, yes, this can work without Rick Grimes. Even if I would prefer for Andrew Lincoln to still be in the show, I was quite satisfied with season 10, even if it was a little bit dull and slow at times, and I think COVID kind of hurt this season overall. And now my number 7 is season 6. Now, season 6 has probably one of my least favorite finales of the entire show, just because they should have killed someone off in that. They shouldn't have made us wait. I understand the understanding of waiting, but for me, it just felt a little bit of a cheap knockoff. But going from there, actually seeing the build up to meeting the Saviors for the first time was great. Seeing where Morgan had been finally coming in after the finale of season 5 was fantastic. Carl loses an eye, which that whole entire horde sequence was great. And I love seeing how season 5 and season 6 was kind of showing, hey, we're trying to build a community again once and for all, and seeing where Rick was after season 5 was fantastic. And really, again, this is the show, this is the season that really started to build up to the Saviors. It's kind of the prologue to it all, and I found season 6 to be a good season that continued to hit some strides, even if it's more of one of those setup ones. Now, my number 6 is season 11. This is the brand new final season for The Walking Dead, and overall, as a fan of The Walking Dead, I liked this last season. I found the last 8 episodes to be a great stride. I think the finale of everything with the Commonwealth was actually done and handled in a very surprising manner, and I like how, again, it gets back to more of the human interaction, and the way that they sprinkle in the zombies towards the end to really bring everyone together felt cheesy, sure, but honestly satisfying. That's something that I can feel and say is that I felt satisfied while watching this finale. That's not something that I expected to get from the finale of this, specifically because we have 3 spin-offs that I honestly expected for those to give us more of a little bit of conclusion, but this concluded a lot. It concluded a little bit more of Negan and Maggie's kind of story and kind of showing, and now I'm interested to see where that goes. Daryl's kind of moving off in his own direction. Carol, I love where they left Ezekiel and Mercer and really much every other character in here. Rosita's death didn't really affect me too much, but I still liked it. And also killing Luke and Julie was kind of surprising. But overall, this was a season that I wish we got a little bit more of Judith as a little ass kicker as she was in like season 9 and season 10. But as concluding everything that we needed to with the Commonwealth and kind of giving an overall satisfying conclusion, this is the best that you could do, specifically because of a lot of the pieces that are missing. And I'm excited to see how the spin-offs can actually do. And this actually got me excited for the spin-offs. I've not been excited for those whatsoever, besides the Rick and Michonne one, and seeing how this one ended, specifically that tease to it, just feels perfect, and it feels like a great chapter of the closing for a lot of these characters, and a great concluding and bringing about for the next chapter of The Walking Dead. Of course, now at the middle of this list, at my number 5 is Season 9. I found Season 9 to be a fantastic reboot of this entire show. This was the long exit, the final exit of Rick Grimes, and then really much the 6-year later reboot of it all that Angela Kang gave us with baby Judith, now a kid, a teenager, I guess, as you can say. RJ's there, Michonne, Daryl, Maggie, Carol, all of them are really leading this up. And I love this because then we get introduced to the Whisperers. And I found that the introduction to the Whisperers killing Jesus off in this season was one of the greatest things ever, because I thought it was an even better introduction than how they introduced them in the comics. Specifically when Jesus goes to ass kick one and it just dodges it and stabs him. What a shocking moment. I knew Jesus was going to die, but I didn't know how. And I loved how Season 9 really much reinvigorated everything, brought us in new characters that were easy enough to fall in love with because of how charismatic they were and how they just flowed totally into the show. And the fact that we get like a red wedding moment with the stakes and the heads on top of them, that was one of the best things that you could possibly see, and I loved the continuation of all these characters, and again, this really felt like a reboot for the entire show. And now my number 4 is Season 1 of The Walking Dead. This is still one of the best seasons of television ever. I love this season. I love how simple in its execution it is, and I also love how different it was from the comics itself, how they built upon that introduction and really gave us a great new hero to follow along with in Rick Grimes, and for a 6-episode season, this was a perfect introduction to everything going on within the world, the zombies, the characters itself, and leading into Season 2, this is that first season that you would love to have. Andrew Lincoln is instantly a character that you want to root for. The characters that you meet, you obviously know who's the asshole, who's not. The drama that's kind of all tension between everyone, people sleeping with each other even though the husband has not been gone for that long, and the horror of the zombies works so well. This is just a perfect first season. As a fan of television, I love this. I was debating on putting this a little bit higher, but there's some nostalgic moments that I have with the other 3 that maybe they aren't as perfect as a show can get. They really work more for me, but Season 1 is like, when you look at a first season of television, this is as perfect as it can get. Brings me into my number 3, and that is Season 5. The return of Morgan finally in this. The season is rifled with so many character deaths, and it's also a fantastic build-up, seeing kind of the back and forth between the hospital and Beth, which I thought some of that was a little bit weak, and maybe that's why this is not in my number 2 or 1, because I debated on that. But this has one of my favorite openings to anything. Carol coming back after being banished and completely and utterly saving their asses, but at the same time seeing Father Gabriel meeting this low-life piece of shit who has had a great redemption arc throughout this entire show, but seeing where he goes from there, and then building up in this, and then seeing Rick take out the cannibals with all of that was just so damn compelling. I love that. As well as Beth's tragic death in here really affected Maggie and Daryl, and I love how that whole direction really went. But I think for me, the reason that season 5 really works for me is the normalcy that they really bring back into Alexandria. Seeing how much they fought to get here, and then seeing Rick brutally killing Pete in front of everyone, and then Morgan walking in on this was really much terrible, because you were hoping for them to finally get that normal life. But when you notice, normal life can be shit sometimes. Again, this is a season that continues to just have character death after character death. Tyrese's death in here. Bob, who gets a great last laugh when the Terminus gang starts to try and eat him. Noah. Oh, one of the most gruesome murders that you'll ever see in here. And, of course, the season ending with the wolves, which honestly were kind of lackluster and didn't really do anything. But other than that, everything that built up in here was just great. Now, my number 2 is season 4. Again, this is where Carol, for me, really started to take off as an amazing character. First off, Herschel's death, one of the cruelest things you'll ever see. This is kind of the end of everything with the governor. Did such a great job building him up in season 3 and then ending it by the midpoint of season 4, the prison being destroyed, and everything of that nature. And the pivotal moments in season 4 of splitting everyone up into smaller groups gave us a lot of character interactions in there, and seeing the brutalization of all of them kind of coming together, specifically when Rick has to save his son and that whole group comes in, and then Daryl comes in with them. That was whole great. I still rewatch that scene sometimes of Rick just beating and murdering those people in such a great way. Again, we get that old Rick finally. But again, tying it back to what I said about Carol, while this season does have 2 slow episodes with the governor, which I feel like were needed, but you could have done it in a little bit better of a way, I love that scene with Carol taking Lizzie out and telling her to look at the flowers. It's still one of the most shocking revelation moments in The Walking Dead. And again, something that they added upon from the comics that I thought was done even better than it was in there. And I think the show did it perfectly. At my number 1 is season 3, and this is the best season of The Walking Dead for me. Everything that it builds up with each and every one of the characters taking over the prison, losing Lori, Rick going crazy, Carl having to really man up, Daryl having to man up, everyone having to man up. We get an introduction to Michonne, who really becomes one of the big fan favorite characters. On Andrea, a little bit wasted in here, specifically all of her stuff with the governor. But the governor, everyone talks about Negan being one of the best villains in The Walking Dead. I argue I think he's one of the best just layered out characters. The governor is still the best villain in this entire show. The way that they build this guy up, and the pieces that they work from top to bottom was just incredible. And when you notice, like, this is the first time in this apocalypse where you see a guy with tremendous power, with terrible, terrible thoughts, how the threats of just one man can lead to tyranny and everything else. The fact that you could turn Daryl's brother Merle, a piece of shit in season 1, into someone that you're rooting for in the end, and then Daryl losing him is just, again, one of the most heartbreaking things you would ever see. In general, coming off season 2, which is a season that was really slow, this was a season that built up everything that we needed and more. You get Sasha, you get Tyrese, you get the prison group, you get all the dynamics of there. I wish they would have added in one of the things from the prison, from the comics. If you've read the comics, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But this is the perfect next breath of fresh air for The Walking Dead. I have no complaints with this season. I love the dramatic avenues that they took with each and every one of these characters, of touching about loss, power, leadership, and everything that you need to do. And I think, again, the character deaths are in here were shocking, surprising, and overall, this is my favorite season of The Walking Dead. So with all that said, guys, that is my ranking of The Walking Dead. I thoroughly enjoyed talking about The Walking Dead. This is, again, just one of those shows I really liked. And if you do also like talking movies and TV, again, hit that like and subscribe button, because I am reviewing Andor as well, the brand new Star Wars series, which you should all be watching. I'm going to be ranking all the Star Wars TV shows, as well as all the Star Wars TVs, movies, and shows this week, as well as ranking all Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, since Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday special, also comes out this week. So thank you guys so much again for watching. And of course, until next time, stay classy.